Hey everyone, I'm Noah with HB, and I'm here with Kluwe. You might have seen him go viral in recent days for a peaceful protest at a Huntington Beach City Council meeting. We have him here for a quick chat to talk about the important issues for Huntington Beach residents. Now, my first question to you, Chris, is what's your original script? So in the last sentence of it, it says, if this council wants to have MAGA represent our community, as someone who actually believes in the Constitution, I can only have one response to Nazis. In here, you didn't write about anything about protesting at all. So I wanted to ask you, when and why did you decide that your response was going to be about peaceful civil disobedience?
Yeah, so when I showed up to the city council meeting, I was about like 70-30 in my mind on whether or not I was going to actually, peacefully protest. And then when Mayor Burns decided to give us the big lecture on like, don't do this, we're watching you, that pretty much solidified it for me because I may have some authoritarian issues. And it was very clear from the start that since he was only giving us a minute to talk and there were only 50 people there signed up for public comment, they didn't want to hear what we had to say. So if they didn't want to hear what we had to say, well, we have to make them aware that, this is important to us. This is a matter that is really concerning to this community. And that's their attempts to get rid of our library and replace it as a propaganda machine.
Absolutely. I do want to ask, so I believe you did say that the police were respectful and everything like that, but I wanted to ask, what happened to you after the police carried you out of the city council meeting?
So the police carried me out of the city council meeting, and then after we were out, I was like, hey guys, you can let me down, I'll walk from here. And I literally told them, I'm not here to make your lives miserable. I'm here because our council is not recognizing us as a community and they're not listening to us. So then they walked me over to the jail, which is right across the plaza. They booked me in, and then from the way the detention officials were acting, it seemed like it was going to be a fairly quick thing. Like should have been like no more than an hour or so. And that's what they told my wife as well when she called to ask, kind of what was going on. I waited in my cell for I think 2 to 2.5 hours. It's tough to tell time in a jail cell. There's no clocks. So I waited for about 2 to 2.5 hours for them to actually book me with something. And then finally got out about 4 hours later, 4 hours, 15 minutes later. And my question is like, okay, what happened in those 2 to 2.5 hours? Like, did someone from the council make a call? Because I later got in contact on Blue Sky with a former council member who said, this isn't normally what happens. Like normally, because they've had people act up before in city council meetings, and normally what happens is the police just escort them from the room, take them outside, give them a warning, and then they go on their way. So I'd be very curious to know what went on behind the scenes while I was sitting in my jail cell.
That's a good question to have, yeah. So obviously this is a big question on everybody's mind, not only in Huntington Beach, but across the country. As you see on Twitter and Blue Sky, people are asking, do you plan to run for Huntington Beach City Council next year to sort of replace one of these MAGA people on the city council?
I'm not sure. That's something, obviously I'm gonna try to keep all my options open. I'm not a huge person that wants to do politics. Like I would rather people treat each other appropriately and everyone's free to live their lives. And so that way we don't have to have these types of council meetings, right? We don't have to have people peacefully protesting because the council won't listen. Because this is supposed to be an apolitical body. The city council is supposed to work for the entire community, which means when the community tells you, we don't like what you're doing, the city council is supposed to listen. And then they talk it over, and then they figure out, okay, what's best for our community as a whole. And from what I've seen from this city council for the past 2.5, 3 years, they have no intention of doing what's best for the community because they don't have our self-interest in mind. They have their self-interest in mind, and they want to make themselves more powerful.
So on the topic of elections, as a young voter, I know this past election cycle, we had really low young voter turnout. And I wanted to ask you, how do you think young voters and young people in general can help support the cause and turn the tide in the midterm elections next year?
Well, I think one way that can happen is us older people need to give younger voters a reason to get excited to go out and vote. The Democratic campaign was pretty bad last year. Like they did not do a whole lot to incentivize younger people to get out and vote because it's a retread of the same old people who have been in politics for the last 50 years. Like what's exciting about that? That's how we got to this point. Like if you want to energize young people, give them a reason to get energized, right? And if we don't do that, we can't be surprised when they don't show up and vote. So I hope that younger voters are paying attention to what's going on and finding a way to get energized, but it's also on us as older people to give them a reason to get energized.
So is running for city council, is that a maybe?
It's like I said, I'm keeping my options open. We'll see what happens.
Good to hear, good to hear. So before the city council meeting, there was a video of you at the Library and Community Services meeting where the MAGA plaque was approved 7-0 originally. Why do you think it's important for libraries to be protected?
Because libraries are supposed to be a community resource. They're supposed to be a safe space for anyone who wants to come check out a book and read. And if you have an overtly political message on the front of your library, especially a message like MAGA, that tells people you're not welcome here if you don't believe in the things that MAGA believes. And that goes against the very heart of what a library is supposed to be. It's a center for knowledge, and knowledge does not exclude people. It welcomes everyone.
So on that topic, this city is also implementing a book review board to see if books are inappropriate. So what is your favorite banned book and why?
My favorite banned book, Fahrenheit 451, because it is about banning books. And that's pretty much at the core of what they're trying to do with the library. They don't like the information of LGBTQ people existing, so they're trying to get rid of it so they can get rid of those kinds of people. And frankly, I'm not in favor of that because that's what the Nazis did. I don't want us to do that because I don't want to be a Nazi.
Well, you definitely don't. So
I would hope more people would not want to be a Nazi.
I really wish. So what message do you have for Councilmember Gracie Vandermark, who facilitated the MAGA plaque and is basically the originator of this plaque that's going to go in the library?
Yeah, so if I could say anything to Gracie Vandermark, it would be, you need to listen to your community and you need to understand that Donald Trump does not have your best interests in mind. And I know you want to try to work your way up into his political sphere, and I know you think you're gonna get ultimate power and be the person who gets to do whatever they want, but the instant you do something that Donald Trump doesn't like, he is going to get rid of you because that is what he does. So you're either gonna find out then, or you could find out now and actually work with your community to make this a great community and to make it welcoming to everyone, because we all live here. We're all Huntington Beach residents. We want what's best for this town. We don't want it to be some isolated enclave. We are a tourism industry, and it is extremely hard to get tourists to come to a town that is known as the Nazi town. It's very difficult.
I hope Gracie's listening to this because she really needs to hear it with the balancing of the budget, especially, and tourism being a gigantic part of our budget. I've heard that you declined to speak with certain media outlets. Why did you decline the interviews? And do you have any certain media outlets that you do prefer or support?
So I declined to speak with the New York Times specifically because I'm a history and poli-sci major. That's what I studied. And right now, the New York Times is doing exactly what they did when the run-up of Hitler, before he was elected, when he was elected, and then after he was in office. And that's to minimize the role of what he stated he was going to do and try to pretend that he wasn't going to do it. And if you look at the parallels and the article tone and the headline tone, it's almost exactly the same. And I cannot stand for something like that because you are misinforming the public, and as essentially the fourth estate, it is your job to inform people as to the actual danger of a man who would proclaim himself a king.
And then which media outlets did you prefer to look at, or which ones do you support?
So I try to look at a broad variety. I like Daily Kos is kind of left-leaning, but I like them. HuffPost is okay. Funnily enough, The Onion is actually probably one of our best media sources right now, which is kind of sad. But the LA Times used to be good, and then Patrick Soon-Shiang took over, and now it's a billionaire's play toy, and he wants Trump to do what Trump does, which I don't understand why, because it's not going to be good for his business. Biotech doesn't do well under a fascist leadership. But yeah, no, I try to keep my mind open and get news from a wide variety of sources. Because if you only get your news from one source, it's very easy to become like locked into an echo chamber, locked into a bubble. And I'm not saying like go read news, go listen to Newsmax or like Fox News or something like that. Like I very much turn them down just straight on principle because they're propaganda machines. But yeah, try to get a wide variety of sources, so then that way you can collect all the information and then make an informed decision.
And then I also did want to ask, so 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you were protesting in support of LGBTQ rights. How has the media sort of changed between back then with coverage over you and now with coverage over you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because back then it was the amount of coverage felt almost exactly the same. Like the requests I'm getting, the stuff, the interviews I'm doing, it feels almost exactly the same as back then. The difference is back then, it felt like we were still working within the bounds of the American political system. It was, we had one side, we had the other side, we were going to resolve it by voting, and then whoever got the votes, that's the side that would win. Now it feels like we have the American side and we have the Nazi side. And that's really scary because we need to understand as American citizens, the foundation of our country is no kings. And to see a White House official account put out a picture of Donald Trump with a crown on his head, like, if you consider yourself an American citizen, that should make you sick to your stomach, because no kings, not ever. Like, that's what we fought for.
That was distressing, on my perspective as well. Just seeing the White House in general, it's just coverage of that it's horrific. Just seeing the posts that they're doing, the mass deportation ASMR video posting, it's really distressing to see. So thank you so much for highlighting that as well. With your large following on Blue Sky, staking on social media, you have more than 140,000 followers amassed. And I wanted to ask, how do you plan to use that platform to make Huntington Beach a better place for all?
Obviously, I'm gonna keep being me. Like, I don't do social media to make number go up. I do it because I like being on social media and talking with people. But since I do have a platform, I intend to keep making people aware of what's going on in Huntington Beach, and then also making people aware that what's happening in Huntington Beach is a microcosm of what's happening in the country as a whole. Because we are very much a small scale example of what's happening with Donald Trump's administration. We have a city council that doesn't listen to us, that doesn't care about what we as a community want. We have a president who doesn't listen to us, who doesn't care about what we as a nation want. Right? Like, these things are interconnected. The MAGA vision in Huntington Beach is the same as the MAGA vision in the Oval Office. And so we need people to understand that regardless of your political affiliation, if you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever, we have to be able to come together as Americans and say no kings. Because if we don't, we're no longer going to be Americans.
Absolutely. And my last question for you is, on Blue Sky, you posted that instead of donating to you personally, you wanted people to donate to the Trevor Project and Trans Lifeline. Why are these two organizations important to you?
Because they serve marginalized communities. And right now we're seeing Donald Trump's administration is trying to erase trans people from existence. I said it in the speech, and I believe it because I believe it's the truth. I believe they do want to erase trans people from existence. And that is literally what the Nazis started with. They started by going after the trans communities, and then they went on from there. And I believe that Donald Trump will do the exact same thing. He will start with the trans communities, and then he will go on from there. Because they've already said in Project 2025, make trans issues the wedge issue to split between LGB and the T, and then you go after the LGB part. And then they're gonna come after all the people who supported the LGBTQ part. And so I am not going to stand by and watch that happen. Like I'm gonna say something about it, because frankly, I don't want to be a good German that after the wars are over looks back and regrets everything that happened because I didn't do anything.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here with us and for talking with me, and thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.